In this video, we're going to talk about the distance and midpoint formulas. Let's start with the distance formula. Now, I'm going to plot some points on a coordinate plane. So let's plot a point here. Let's plot a point here. And let's plot a point here. Now, notice this will form a right triangle. Okay. Now, let's determine some distances then. Okay. Let's determine that horizontal distance. Now, I can count over 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Now, the other thing I could do if you don't want to count is because the x coordinates are different, I can take the larger x coordinate, which is 5 minus 2, and that gives me 3. Now, let's determine the vertical distance. Now, again, I could count 1, 2, 3, and 4, or I can take it as the y coordinate being 5 minus 1, and that's 4. Now, I know two sides of a right triangle. Well, what can I use here? I can use the Pythagorean theorem. And the Pythagorean theorem tells me I can take a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. In other words, I take one leg of a right triangle, square it, add it to the other leg of a right triangle and square it, and that equals the hypotenuse squared. Remember, the hypotenuse is the side opposite the right angle, and also the longest side in a triangle. So we know one of the legs is 3. We know the other leg is 4. So 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16 is equal to c squared. 9 plus 16 is 25. And I can take the square root of both sides. Well, that's plus or minus 5 is equal to c. Remember, distance is not negative, so my only solution here is 5 equal to c. Now, what I would like to do is to draw one more coordinate plane and show how I can come up with a particular formula in general for this. So I'm going to regraph again. Label my x's and y's. Again, I will put points. But again, I'm not going to label my slashes. I don't want to do that at this particular stage. And draw my right triangle. Now, well, how can I figure the horizontal distance? I can do similar to what I did in the previous example. I can take the higher x coordinate minus the smaller x coordinate, which in this case would be x2 minus x1, because I don't know what either of the x coordinates are. For my vertical distance, I could do something similar. That would be y2 minus y1, because those y coordinates are different. And then I'm going to call this third side of the hypotenuse, we'll call it d for distance. Well, the Pythagorean theorem tells me that I can take a squared, I'll rewrite here, plus b squared is equal to c squared. Well, one of them is x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared is equal to the distance squared. But I want to solve for d, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Now remember, the distance is positive. So guys, I'm not going to put plus or minus. I'm going to assume it's positive because distances are positive. This formula right here gives me the distance between 2 points on a coordinate plane. So it's d is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1, the quantity squared, plus y2 minus y1, the quantity squared. All right, so let's scroll down then. So if I give you 2 points, x1 comma y1 and x2 comma y2, the distance formula is d equal to, so I'm going to rewrite again. I'll write it in red. So hopefully that'll stick. It's x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1, the quantity squared. Okay, so now let's calculate the distance between 2 points. So we'll start off with an easy one here. Now again, I'm going to label this as x1, y1 and x2, y2. Distance, I'm going to write on the side, is going to be x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. Okay, so let's use the distance formula then. So I'll do this in a different color. So square root, well, it's 1 minus a negative 1, the quantity squared, put one more parenthesis, plus it is 2 minus 0, the quantity squared. Well, 1 minus 1 minus a negative 1 is 2. And 2 squared is 4. 2 minus 0 is 2. And 2 squared again is 4. So that's 8, which is equal to the square root of 8. Now, I can pull out perfect roots. So that's the same thing as 2 times the square root of 2. So that is the exact answer for this. And if you wanted to plug that into a calculator, you can certainly do that. Okay, so let's take a look at one other distance problem. Again, we're assuming we're finding the distance for this. So again, I'll write on the side what the distance formula is. Again, I will label x1, y1 and x2, y2. So it's going to be what? Negative 3 minus 5, quantity squared, plus negative 2 minus a negative 4, quantity squared. Well, negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8, and negative 8 squared is 64. Negative 2 minus a negative 4, that's 2, and 2 squared is 4. So here the distance is the square root of 68. Now, I can rewrite that as a square root of 4 times the square root of 17. So the distance here is 2 times the square root of 17. Okay? So make sure that you know the distance formula. Once you know the distance formula, the rest of it is just plugging it into a formula. Okay, the other part of this then is suppose you have 2 test scores and one to calculate your grade. Well, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to take what? The 2 grades, add them together and divide by 2. That would be what your average grade is going to be. Now, again, you're assuming that these test scores have the same weight in class. Well, the midpoint between 2 points is very, very similar. The midpoint is going to tell me I'm going to take the midpoint of the 2 x coordinates, and I'm going to take the midpoint of the 2 y coordinates. So your midpoint is what? x1 plus x2 divided by 2, comma, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Remember, the midpoint should give you an ordered pair. Okay, so now I want to be able to calculate, that should be the midpoint, so I'll fix that. I want to calculate the midpoint between these 2 points. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite the formula here. Okay, so the midpoint then would be what? Negative 1 plus 1 divided by 2, comma, 0 plus 2 all over 2. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. 0 divided by 2 is 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. Divided by 2 is 1. So the midpoint between these 2 points is The ordered pair is 0, 1. Okay, so let's do one other midpoint example then. Again, I will write the midpoint formula over here. Okay. All right, so let's do that. That's going to be what? 5 plus a negative 3 all over 2, comma, negative 4 plus a negative 2 all over 2. Now, 5 plus a negative 3 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Negative 4 plus negative 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So the midpoint between these two ordered pairs is 1 and negative 3.